Ladies and gentlemen, we are back after a mini vacation back to New Jersey for a few days. And as I was gone, the Cavs made and/or didn't make a ton of moves that deserved a little bit of discussion. So I had to, on my off day, on a holiday, hop on the Ultimate Cavs stream to discuss some of the things I think need to be talked about after a wild, kooky, and wonky weekend for your Cleveland Cavaliers. All that's coming up right now on a Sunday edition of the Ultimate Cavaliers Show. What's up, guys? We are back. If you have a question, comment, concern, any of the above, leave it in the comment section. I will get to as many of those as I can. At the end of the stream here, we're going to go for 20, 25 minutes, talk some Cavs, hang out, and talk some ball with you guys. As we always do, I hope you enjoyed your 4th of July. And whatever you got into this weekend, apparently it was beautiful weather in Cleveland. It was beautiful weather back in New Jersey as well. But we are back, and the Cavs have added to their coaching staff. They have not added to their roster, and we're going to talk about some of the moves and lack thereof over the course of the next 20. That is one thing that's especially important to bring to the forefront is how Kenny Atkinson is building and putting together his first coaching staff with the Cleveland Cavaliers. As of 4:02 on Sunday afternoon, the Cavaliers coaching staff consists of Damari Carroll, I'm drawing a blank on the name. Hold on one second here. I just had this pulled up, and then I closed my browser to hit live on stream, so now I'm going to pull it back up. Here it is. The Cavs staff, as of right now, consists of 5 coaches. Kenny Atkinson's your head coach. Johnnie Bryant is your assistant head coach. We'll talk about him in one sec. They poached him from the New York Knicks. Damari Carroll and Jordan Ott joined the staff from the Los Angeles Lakers staff. And then Dan Giroux stays with Cleveland, and he'll join Kenny Atkinson's staff, a holdover from the J.B. Bickerstaff era. And the one thing that Kenny Atkinson stressed over and over and over during his introductory press conference was his desire to assemble a staff around him that is collaborative, brings different ideas to the table, and most importantly, can help him create a back and forth open dialogue between the players and the staff to come up and corroborate on the best way for this Cavaliers team, whatever the roster looks like, to compete in the Eastern Conference and hopefully for an NBA championship. When you look back at how Kenny Atkinson was run out of Brooklyn, there was no secret to what his downfall was. He was a grinder, a worker, a guy who demanded everything from everyone on every day in every situation, whether it was practice, shoot around, a game, a walkthrough. You had to be locked in 110%. He himself described his own coaching style as being a grinder and a guy that wears down players. And fast forward from 2016 to 2020 to now 2024 and beyond, with some stints with Ty Lue and Steve Kerr, who are known as players coaches, I think Kenny Atkinson has understood to a higher degree the need to let go of the reins a little bit and don't have to essentially grind players down day in and day out to get their best results. And 2, have other guys on the staff that, hey, if I'm a grinder and this is my style, I need to have a balance on my staff of guys who aren't necessarily of that same coaching style. And that's not a bad thing. And the Cavs' secret weapon in all of this, because when you look at each of these hires, they're not necessarily promotions for any of these guys. Johnnie Bryant was the associate head coach in New York. He's the associate head coach in Cleveland. Dan Perot, we're not sure exactly what his role on the staff will be, but he's staying on with a new head coach in Cleveland. Damari Carroll, Jordan Ott, they're coming over. Once again, not necessarily promotions, but they're just changing staffs. Part of the reason for that, and this is a good thing, this is not a knock, this is a good thing, is Dan Gilbert's willingness to open up the checkbook and pay coaches that Kenny Atkinson has circled and said, this guy's a perfect fit with me. So here's a little extra money to go take a parallel move and join this staff that we are assembling here in Cleveland. Now, we're going to talk about the moves in the roster and should they go into the luxury tax, what that would mean, the first apron, the second apron, why certain owners are willing to pay more than others. And Dan Gilbert has never been shy about opening his paybook. But when it comes to coaches and their salaries, and a lot of it goes unknown outside the head coach. We always know what the head coach makes. The other guys, it's usually an unknown. The willingness to pay, because it doesn't go against the salary cap. There's no limit on spending for a coaching staff. If you want the best, sometimes you have to pay for the best. And with Donovan's persuasion, with Kenny Atkinson's persuasion, with the ability to come into a new coaching environment and start something fresh, build something from the ground up here in Cleveland with Kenny Atkinson, who's now here in his first season with the Cavs, that's an opportunity of a lifetime for a lot of these guys who may be looking at their current situation prior to coming to Cleveland and saying, I'm not 100% sure we can win at the highest level with this group. And I'm not 100% sure if we don't win at the highest level, I'm going to be here and have a job here for the foreseeable future. But there's this person, and this person being Kenny Atkinson, calling me and saying, hey, I'll give you a raise to come join a hell of a team in the East, a team that has, at least in their own minds, championship aspirations, and come build something special here in Cleveland. And I think there's no better example of that than the Johnnie Bryant example as the Cavs poached him from the Knicks. The Knicks hired Johnnie Bryant in 2020 to eventually help entice Donovan Mitchell to sign or ask to be traded to the New York Knicks. That's not opinion. That is a fact. Part of the reason he was hired, and he is a phenomenal coach in his own right. Donovan has spoke extremely highly about him from their time together in Utah. Emmanuel Quickley and Julius Randle both gave him the highest of praise possible for how he worked with them individually with the Knicks. But he wasn't one of Tom Thibodeau's main guys. Back in New Jersey, in the New York Post, I'm going to read this word for word. I tweeted it out this morning. But the New York Post wrote an article about the Cavs signing Johnnie Bryant away this morning. And they mentioned that, quote, this is from the New York Post, Thibodeau still has the assistants he hired and feels most comfortable with on his staff, including Darren Erman, Rick Brunson, Daniel Brady, and Andy Greer. And I read that as, well, Bryant was brought in for a specific reason. He was never necessarily, quote unquote, one of Tibbs' guys. He was a Donovan guy. And now in Cleveland, he has a chance to become an Atkinson guy on top of being a Donovan guy. And he's a coach that interviewed for the head coaching position. So clearly the front office felt highly of his capabilities. Now he's going to be your top assistant with a player in their star, Donovan Mitchell, who is extremely comfortable with. He has a knack of player development and a history and a track record of getting the most out of guys who have then gone on to become very, very, very valuable players in the league. And you include that skill set on top of Kenny Atkinson's player development skill set, and you get this mesh and collection of different offensive philosophies, different abilities to converse and interact with your star players. Hell, Jordan Ott and DeMarre Carroll spent the last 2 years in LA with LeBron and Anthony Davis. You think they've learned a thing or two about how to handle a star player and the communication back and forth between that entity? Plus, they've worked with and/or played for Kenny Atkinson. I just love the way. The staff's not done. There's still more pieces to be put in place. But the way this puzzle is coming together, and in my opinion, Dan Gilbert's willingness to open the checkbook to pay for some of the right pieces of the puzzle to make their way to Cleveland has been the Cavs' secret weapon to the offseason thus far. Now, I promise you we'll talk about the roster moves and the lack thereof in a sec. But in terms of assembling a coaching staff, which is half the battle, you need your roster and you need your coaches. The Cavs are putting together a coaching staff that makes a lot of sense. We'll find out these official titles, if Atkinson will have a quote-unquote offensive and defensive coordinator, and who those will be. We'll find out who is more on the player development side and who is more on the scouting and game prep side. That'll all come into place. But in terms of putting together a staff, similar to how Kevin Stefanski has done this offseason, bringing in Mike Vrabel. He brought in Jim Schwartz last year. They changed up their offensive coordinator, going from AVP now to Ken Dorsey. They hired Tommy Rees from the collegiate ranks. Stefanski said, hey, I think I know what I'm doing, but I want everyone else's opinion to come together. I want to take a little bit of that from you, a little bit of this from you, a little bit of that from you. And we're going to put together the best game plan and the best strategy to win many, many games in the NFL. That's what Kenny Atkinson is essentially doing for this Cavs staff, whether it's getting 2 coaches from the Lakers, getting a guy from the Knicks, himself coming from Golden State, and collaborating all together on the perfect offensive system, the little tweaks. The NBA runs a lot of the same stuff. Teams just run it slightly different than others. So maybe Kenny Atkinson, for example, is is accustomed to running a double pin down on the backside for a shooter where the top guy ends up being the slipper. And Jordan Knott says, well, hey, we ran that in LA with Anthony Davis and LeBron, and we found it way more effective. If the first screener was the slipper, let's try it. That's the kind of collaboration you need in a coaching staff to be successful. If you look at the Celtics, you look at the Nuggets, you look at the teams over the last couple of years who have been the most successful, they have collaboration and creative minds coming from all over and constantly changing up the bench to accentuate their head coach. That's the first step. And I think so far, at least through the first 4 hires of the Kenny Atkinson era, the Cavs have done a terrific job finding and identifying the right people to put in place and then making sure they all work together from a basketball standpoint. So far on that end, on the coaching staff side of things, I think the Cavs have done a very good job assembling not a roster, but assembling a staff. We're going to talk about FanDuel, then we'll talk about the roster in 1 sec. I don't have the actual FanDuel read. Anthony, don't get mad, so I'm going to wing it, but you guys know I love sports, and sports don't sports as much in the summer as I want them to, so I have to log on to the FanDuel app so I can make sure I get my sports fix every time I want it, whenever I want it, at the tip of my hands. And the best part is FanDuel is giving out either boosts or bonuses daily throughout the whole summer, something new every day for everyone. So make sure you log on to FanDuel.com/UCSS and make your first bet a big-time winner. Get those free boosts, get those daily bonuses. Once again, it is for everybody, every day throughout the summer. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show and the official sportsbook of Major League Baseball. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the roster, because as well as the Cavs, in my opinion, have assembled a staff, there are some serious questions and some legitimate concerns about the roster construction and the lack of moves the Cavs have made this summer. When Koby Altman looked at his offseason task list, number one priority was re-signing Donovan Mitchell. Check. 3 years, $150 million, player option for the last year. Nailed it. But that was an easy one. Number 2 on the offseason checklist was identifying a new head coach to replace J.B. Bickerstaff. While Kenny Atkinson wasn't my first choice, he is certainly a terrific choice for the position and has so far put together a great staff, in my opinion. Okay, 1 and 2 on the checklist, done and done. You got your star, you got your coach, and then it's time to evaluate the rest of the roster. And so far, the Cavs, outside of drafting Jalen Tyson with a 20th pick, have done nothing. Zero, zilch, nada, nothing. They have not signed a single free agent yet. They have not made a single trade yet. The only move they have made is what I mentioned a second ago, re-signing Donovan Mitchell. When you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, the Knicks traded for Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges. Making the Nova Knicks a reality. The 76ers signed Paul George and Andre Drummond, and they gave Tyrese Maxey an extension. They got Caleb Martin, and they seemingly turned a ton of cap space into a ton of valuable players in a way that it never really pans out. Like, teams have been tanking and opening up cap space, praying for a big-time free agent to sign with them, and then they'll turn the extra money into other free agents, and it never pans out, but it did for the Sixers. Do you know Paul George is the first NBA All-Star player who had just made an All-Star team to sign outright with a new team in free agency since 2019? Like, it's crazy. It doesn't happen nearly as often as you would expect, especially with teams hoarding money. The Boston Celtics re-signed everybody. They're running it back. The Pacers re-signed Siakam. Re-signed Obi Toppin. Who else in the East? The Heat. They've lost some guys. The Bucks on the margin moves. They had 2 picks they drafted. They haven't done a ton, but they're more banking on a full year of Doc Rivers and Giannis being healthy and Dame being healthy for natural improvement. The Cavs, on the other hand, are sitting there kind of waiting for the dominoes to fall. And at first I said, all right, they don't have a ton of money. Isaac Okoro and what happens with him in restricted free agency, that's going to depend on how much of the mid-level exception the Cavs have available to them. So they'll let the first domino or 2 fall, and then they'll get aggressive. There are some tier 2 free agents out there that made a lot of sense for this team on paper. Then a few more dominoes fell. I'm like, the free agency pool and the list of guys I think who make sense with this roster is slowly deteriorating. But They have to sign somebody. They can't just run it back completely with the same roster. That'd be asinine. Everyone else in the East improved. You finished 4th in the Eastern Conference last year. You got to do something. And then a few more dominoes have fallen. And now we are at the bottom of the bin. And there are still a few guys out there who on paper would make your team better, but we're talking marginally better. There's no one in the free agent pool left who is going to take the Cavs and catapult them up a entire tier in the ranking systems, however you want to tier them right now, whether you want to group them in with Indiana and New York and Philly and Milwaukee, or you want to put them below. Like Paul Reed, who I think is one of the guys that makes sense, isn't moving the needle from the Cavs from, 45 wins to 55. Like you're picking from the bargain bin now, which doesn't mean there's no value, but it's significantly less value than if you were able to make some sort of splash hire for a bigger name 3-and-D wing, even a Caleb Martin, a guy who Philly just got, who I thought would have been a really good fit in Cleveland. He's not a 5 or 6 win improvement guy by himself. So then it comes down to trades. And the Cavs, when they're making trades and looking at trades, their biggest asset is Isaac Okoro. And the question I wanted to ask you guys, which then I'll give you my opinion on, is how much value does Isaac Okoro really have? So I want you to put in the chat, and I'll read some of these at the end of my point here. What is Isaac Okoro's value in your mind? And do other teams covet Isaac Okoro? Because if the answer is yes, then you think a package of Isaac Okoro and some sort of sign and trade might be enough to get you a valuable asset in return. If you don't think Isaac Okoro is worth much, then you really don't have any trade assets to play with, and it's going to be extremely difficult to bring in any player of significant value without breaking up the core 4, which is a whole separate discussion that we've done and I'll have again and again. But I'm going to operate for right now under the impression that Koby Altman truly wants to keep this core 4 together and has no intention of trading either Jared Allen or Evan Mobley or Darius Garland, and certainly not Donovan Mitchell. So if those 4 are off the table, and you could say right or wrong, I'm not telling you one way or the other. I've made my opinion on that very clear. I would break it up for the right opportunity, but I'm not just going to trade one of them to trade one of them. If those 4 are off the table, I'm not quite sure what you could realistically get back with the assets the Cavs currently have. And that goes back one further point that I want to make, which is Koby Altman, earlier in his tenure as the Cavs president of basketball operations, we call him the GM. He's technically the president of basketball operations. People who want to correct us on that every time, get a life. It doesn't matter. He's the one making the decisions. Mike Gansey is the general manager technically, but those two together are the ones making the decisions. When he went all in on Donovan Mitchell, when he traded all the draft assets and he traded Lauri Markkanen and Colin Sexton and Ochai Agbaji, he pushed most of his chips to the table. And even after that, the Cavs had limited assets to improve the roster. But since making that move, the Cavs have been relatively complacent in their roster construction. And I think it's worth pointing out, and I'm pulling up a tweet because I put together the exact moves the Cavs have made since then. When you go all in on a player like Donovan Mitchell, even if you get him to re-sign, and now the Cavs have a concrete timeline of, hey, now we have to go make more moves, you've already kind of boxed yourself into the situation because, A, you're limited from a cap standpoint, because now extensions for Evan Mobley and Darius Garland have kicked in, and Isaac Okoro's price is going to go up, and you made a significant acquisition last year and trying to get Max Strus, who you overpaid a little bit for, but you had to overpay to get him. The George Niang contract, in hindsight, doesn't look great. But you had an opportunity before these extensions kicked in and everyone got more expensive to put more pieces around Donovan Mitchell to see who fits and who doesn't. And granted, injuries happened last year. I totally understand that. But I look at this situation like I look at a rookie quarterback contract in the NBA, in the NFL. Evan Mobley was making pennies on the dollar to what he's about to make before his rookie max extension, which will be signed. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. If Franz Wagner got the rookie max, then Evan Mobley will get the rookie max, and Jalen Green is going to get the rookie max. It's just how it works. I'd be shocked if it doesn't. I'm not reporting that. I'd be shocked if it doesn't. Players of Evan's caliber get the rookie max. It's just how it works. Whether it's right or wrong, we could argue, but he's going to get it. He was on a cheap contract. His extension is going to kick in. Darius Garland's rookie max extension, you had time before that became as high of a cap hit as possible to put other pieces around him. And they did. And they were, there were attempts to be aggressive. They just didn't necessarily hit home runs like they thought they were. The Max Strus signing, which 1 year on a 4-year deal, he could certainly play better. But it was $16 million for a guy who was he truly worth $16 million? Maybe not. But you had to overpay to get him. I get it. The George Niang contract, in hindsight, he was unplayable in the postseason. Since the Mitchell trade, over the last 2 years, these are the players that Koby Altman has added to the Cavs to put them in a position to win a championship. Sam Merrill, Max Strus, Amani Bates, Craig Porter Jr., Jalen Tyson, and George Niang. That's it. I'm going to read that one more time. Since acquiring Donovan Mitchell, these are the players the Cavs have added to help elevate them from a good team to a championship contender. Sam Merrill, Max Strus, Amani Bates, Craig Porter Jr., Jalen Tyson, and George Niang. In that same exact time period, the Knicks have added Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, Dante DiVincenzo, OJ Anunoby, 3 draft picks, and they made 9 trades. The Celtics added Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, Xavier Tillman. They made 3 draft picks, and they made 10 trades. Along those same lines, the Bucks have added Damian Lillard, DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince. They made 5 trades. The Heat, a lesser team, Terry Rozier, Josh Richardson, Kevin Love, Alec Burks, Thomas Bryant, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Khalil Ware. They've made 4 trades. You can make the case that Koby Altman has been aggressive, but has he been aggressive enough? That's in the eye of the beholder. You can make a case that he has had enough time to find ways to package assets together. And there are always ways to create assets. It's just a matter of what you want to part ways with. To put the Cavs in a better position they are in today, which is not a ton of assets to work with, limited cap space, and a roster that is pretty damn expensive in terms of their core. But is that core good enough to compete at the highest level? I'm just giving you the questions to ask, and then you can formulate your own opinions. You can bank on the internal development that Kenny Atkinson and Johnnie Bryant and the rest of the staff brings to elevate Evan Mobley and Jared Allen and hopefully Jalen Tyson and Max Strus and Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. And in theory, that all sounds great. But is the internal improvement enough to keep up with the likes of the Bostons, the New Yorks, the Philadelphias, the Milwaukees, the Indianas of the East? It looks like the Cavs are banking on that. And part of the reason I think they're banking on that is trying to get inside the head of an NBA front office executive is a fruitless exercise because the way we look at something is differently than the way they look at something. NBA GMs and NFL GMs and Major League Baseball GMs and I'm sure hockey GMs and I'm sure soccer GMs in the Premier League are stubborn. And they all think, as they should, that they are smarter than everyone else in the room. That's why they got the position they're at. And when you make a draft pick, whether it's an Isaac Okoro, or it's an Evan Mobley, or a Darius Garland, or a Jalen Green, or a Cade Cunningham, or whoever, a Scotty Barnes, you want to be proven right. And you're going to give these players every opportunity to make you look smart. And Koby Altman, I feel like, has boxed himself in this corner of the we don't want to break up the core 4. And we've drafted well. And look at all the moves we've made on the margins that, once again, you can argue, and there are stats that say they're probably better than some people think. And then there's the eye test that says, I don't really care about the numbers. I don't trust them enough in a big moment. And there's validity to both sides of that, to where you have to make a steadfast and hard decision on what the route you want to take in the future is. And from the Cavs standpoint, I feel like Koby is looking at his roster and saying, I've done a damn good job building a roster. And I want to see this through, so I'm going to be extra patient unless I'm blown out of the water by a trade offer. I'm not giving up these guys that I myself was in charge of bringing to Cleveland. I don't necessarily think that's the best course of action, but I also am willing to understand if that's the decision that Koby wants to make. It's not the one I would make, but I understand the logic and the thinking behind it. And that brings us to the Isaac Okoro trade value. Is Koby looking at Isaac Okoro in one way saying, hey, him for Cam Johnson straight up, once again, I'm just throwing a name out there, that's a fair trade. And then the Nets are looking at that, and Sean Marks is saying, no, it's not. Like, we need significantly more. Okay, what else do you have? We got 3 second-round picks. That's not going to move the needle for the Nets or Sean Marks. Bobby Marks was on ESPN a couple days ago, and I believe I have the quote. So let's listen to what Bobby Marks had to say. It's an 18-second soundbite on Isaac Okoro. This is Bobby Marks of ESPN.
So Cleveland's got Isaac Okoro, who's a restricted free agent. Look at maybe signing trade options for him. Maybe a bigger wing on a I don't want to give away the beans here. So keep an eye on Cleveland as far as signing trade options for Isaac Okoro here.
That was on Wednesday. We are now Sunday, and there's been nothing of substantial value to corroborate what Bobby Marks said. The only guy on paper who makes sense for the Cavs, no, take it back. Let me rephrase that. He's not the only guy on paper who makes sense. It's the only guy who I think his value is pretty equal to the player you'd be getting in return with a few extra assets would be Dorian Finney-Smith of Brooklyn. Cam Johnson is the prize. In a perfect world, a couple picks, Isaac Okoro and Caris LeVert for Cam Johnson would make the Cavs better today. But is that enough for the Nets to part ways with Cam Johnson, who's arguably their most valuable asset right now? Especially when you look at their GM, Sean Marks, who turned down 2 first-round picks for Dorian Finney-Smith straight up last year. Now he's going to trade away Cam Johnson for Okoro, LeVert, and 3 seconds. I just can't see it happening. I don't think he's a realistic possibility just because if he was truly available, I have to imagine other teams who are also looking for 3-and-D wings can put together a better package than Isaac Okoro, who has shown flashes in the past, but was unplayable in the playoffs. So the Nets are like, yeah, we'd love to take a chance on the guy who literally couldn't stay on the court for you last year in the playoffs or the year before and is now going to make 50, 60 million, whatever the contract number ends up at, and a couple second-round picks. That there's just no way that's enough, in my opinion. Is it enough for Dorian Finney-Smith? I do think that's a conversation that Altman and Sean Marks, will have, and if they haven't already, will definitely have in the future. But does Dorian Finney-Smith make you significantly better? I'm not sure he's a huge upgrade, but the one thing he does provide is a little more roster flexibility. DFS Finney-Smith is a 3-4, unlike Okoro, who's a 2-3, and the Cavs currently have a plethora of guys on the wing who play the 2-3. Strus, Jalen Tyson, LeVert, all those guys now, instead of having Okoro in that mix, you have a little more roster flexibility to put Finney-Smith at the 4 in small ball lineups and get some of the other guys who play the 2-3 combo position some minutes, especially Jalen Tyson, who I'm very excited to see as a rookie this year. So he's a guy I think makes sense. If we're looking at other options, would Atlanta be willing to trade Isaac Okoro and change for DeAndre Hunter, who makes the exact same amount of money as Cam Johnson? They just drafted Zachariah Risa-Shea, who plays a 3-and-D position. I have absolutely no idea what Atlanta's trying to do. They traded DeJounte Murray. Hunter's not on a crazy contract, and he doesn't need the ball a lot, which is a perfect fit next to Trae Young. So would they be interested in Okoro? I don't know. I just don't think in the big picture, Isaac has a ton of value as a trade asset. And when you put together the Cavs' best potential package of Isaac Okoro, Caris LeVert, who's on an expiring contract, and a couple second-round picks, or a 2031 first, unfortunately, I just don't know if that's getting you anyone of value that's going to significantly improve the Cavs' chances of competing in the East. It could slightly improve them. I'm not saying you can't get better with that package. I just don't know if we're going to get the type of return in a trade for that package that I think we all expected the Cavs to make in some way, shape, or form when the offseason started. I'm talking the Brandon Ingrams of the world, the big-name acquisitions who could change the complexion of this entire Cavs roster. I just don't think the Cavs have the assets or the desire to part ways with they have the assets. I just don't think they have the desire to part ways with the assets needed to make a splash like that. So, yeah, that's kind of where I lie right now. The Cavs are just sitting patient. I don't know how you could feel good about your standing in the East unless you know something that we don't in terms of Atkinson's plans to how he wants to use and develop these guys. And then if that is your big swing is internal development, you just have to have your fingers crossed and do a couple extra Hail Marys before bed every night that these guys can make that jump. It's not crazy to think that if the Cavs and all their players take a little jump, and some more than others, Garland in particular and Mobley in particular, take these big jumps, the Cavs in theory should have 4 players that are top 55 guys in the league. Now, the Celtics had 5 guys last year, but not many teams could say they have 4 guys in the top 55 if they take the jump they need. And if you have 4 guys in the top 55 and they don't pan out, then there's clearly a fit issue. And I kind of think there's a fit issue already, but I don't agree with it, but I can see the logic of Koby saying, I think these guys are all better than their value is on the trade market, so let's run it back. But I think there's a glaring hole still in a true need for a 3-and-D wing, a big 3-and-D wing on this team. And I'm just not sure the Cavs can acquire that player without breaking up the core 4, which if he was available for, I would, but I ain't Koby Altman. My name is Mike Lucas. I go by McNuggets, and I play D3 hoops. That's the only thing me and Koby have in common. We both play D3 hoops. That's about it. All right, let's get to some comments. I got 100 in here, so I'll read what I can. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. I missed you guys. Oh, and before I read these comments, I got something to say. And this is a sincere thank you, guys. The feedback I got from the sit down with Kenny Atkinson was pretty special, and it meant a lot to me. And not just me, but it meant a lot to the Cavs because I had a few conversations with the Cavs afterwards from a PR standpoint. And they want to allow us to do more of those one-on-ones moving forward with players and such. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for enjoying that. I'm glad it came out as well as it did, and I'm glad the feedback was as positive as it was. And I just want to say thank you guys because part of the reason the Cavs are going to extend this invite to me again is they saw that you guys enjoyed it so much. And when they see a positive reaction to something, they go, hey, well, let's run it back. So essentially, I just wanted to say thank you guys for watching it, for liking it, for commenting on it. The words meant a lot. I don't usually read the comments. I did on that one, which could go one of 2 ways, but they happen to be positive. So seriously, thank you guys. And I'm looking forward to doing some more of that with players and assistant coaches, et cetera, throughout the season. So if there's someone in particular you want to see me try and sit down with for a little 10-minute chat on some hoops, shoot me a message. You can leave a comment here. Obviously, I'd love to talk to Donovan and the big-name players. That may be further down the line, but if you have a suggestion on someone you think is worth having a combo with, let me know, and we will try to set that up in the near future. We're going to read some of these comments here, and then we will get on with our Sunday. It's beautiful. I'm going to go for a little bike ride after this. Let's see. I have over 200 in here. So, oh yeah, Sean, what's up, Sean Ferguson? I told you I'd give you a shout out last time and I missed it. So there's your shout out. Evan 419 says, Mike, with Detroit continuing to chip away at their cap space, what can Okoro be expecting now money-wise? I still think the Pistons, and I could be wrong, I know they signed Tobias Harris. I know they got Malik Beasley for 1 year, $6 million. Like, hey, Cleveland, like, if that's the price, why the hell aren't you in the Malik Beasley market? I mean, he's not a great player by any means, but he certainly can help as a three-point shooter. His defense is a little overrated, but he's a guy, if push comes to shove, just for depth purposes, I think 1 year, $6 million is a bargain. I still think he's looking anywhere between like 11 and 15 million, somewhere between 4 for 44 and 4 for 60-ish, somewhere in that range. I do think it would be hysterical if he reunited with JB Bickerstaff in Detroit and they had a lineup, and I mentioned this on the last pod I did with Real Cavs fans, of Ron Holland, who they just drafted, the Thompson twin, who they just drafted last year, Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Isaac Okoro. None of those guys can shoot. It'd be the ultimate zag in the history of basketball. So Jay Got Juice says, no assets, no money. What are y'all expecting? That's kind of what I'm putting out there. I don't know what the realistic expectation is unless you want to break up the core four, because the Cavs do have assets. The question is, will they part ways with said assets? And there are always ways, by the way. There are always ways to acquire assets and find cap room. There's always ways. It's about getting creative. Daryl Morey does it as well as anyone. And look at what they just did this summer. Now, the Cavs could do that in theory by like trading away Darius Garland for, in a similar situation to what the Sixers did with James Harden. It's not easy, but there are ways to go. Also, shout out Bo Naylor for the go-ahead home run, by the way. That is big time, big time, big time. B Skills said, I was thinking about some way to get Brandon Ingram and Cam Johnson. 0% chance to get both. 0% chance they get both. I mean, Ingram's the one that the Brandon Ingram sweepstakes are shrinking, just like the suitors for Isaac Okoro. Now that the Kings got DeMar DeRozan, it feels like the Pelicans and the Cavs are doing some sort of slow dance here, and they want Jared Allen. It's a matter of, will Koby Altman part ways with Jared Allen? Who knows? But it'd be Jared Allen and something. And I have someone sent me a trade proposal. It's actually the perfect time to do this. Hold on. Someone sent me a trade proposal on Twitter this morning about Jared Allen and Brandon Ingram. And I wanted to read this for you. This is from Don the Amazing Spider-Man, who suggested the Cavs trade Jared Allen and Isaac Okoro in a sign-in trade to the Pelicans for Brandon Ingram and 2 first-round picks, and then flip those 2 first-round picks as part of a next trade to the Jazz for Lauri Markkanen, 2 first-rounders and Darius Garland for Lauri Markkanen, which would make your core 4 Donovan Mitchell, Brandon Ingram, Lauri Markkanen, and Evan Mobley. That is a very fun Twitter trade, but I don't think in any world you're getting 2 first-round picks plus Ingram for Jared Allen and Okoro. I think that's a pretty straight up. I'm not sure there's picks going any direction. I think Allen for Ingram is pretty it's pretty straightforward. Plus, they just gave up picks in the DeJounte Murray trade, so I'm not sure how many picks they even have left to trade. And if you had 2 first-round picks, I'm not sure Garland and 2 firsts enough for Lauri Markkanen either. He's the biggest trade asset on the market right now. It's funny. He actually may, as crazy as this sounds, he may have more trade value right now than Donovan Mitchell did when the Cavs acquired Donovan Mitchell because of the contract, which you're going to have to sign him to a big extension. But he's going to get 4 first round. He's going to get a Mikal Bridges-esque deal. So that was a fun trade proposal. On paper, I just can't see any way that the Cavs would get 2 firsts for Ingram, and then I don't think Utah would be interested in 2 firsts and Garland for Markkanen. So fun. We're going to keep on moving. Let's see. Rumple Foreskin says, remember the dagger Okoro hit to beat Brooklyn a couple years ago, just before his knee injury? He was showing potential. Okoro's not bad, and he does have potential. The question is, will he ever develop a consistent enough jump shot to be a threat in the playoffs? We've seen 2 playoff series in a row, or 2 seasons in the playoffs in a row. Teams just didn't guard him. And when you have a perimeter player, aka a non-big who they can just not guard, it essentially makes you unplayable on in a playoff situation, which hurts your value. And this riles up with Roland Walker. Says he has good value as a young piece with an upward trajectory and a reasonable contract. Yeah, he has some value. Some value. It's just, is it enough to get a bigger piece like a Cam Johnson, who is a better player and makes slightly more money than Okoro may on this new deal? I'm not saying he has no value. I just don't think it's as high as some people may seem to believe on Twitter. Let's see what else we got. Latte Larry says the only small forward the Cavs should be eyeing is DeAndre Hunter. I mentioned him earlier. He'd be a fit and definitely an upgrade if the Hawks would be willing to part ways with him. Once again, is Okoro, LeVert, and second rounders enough? I don't know. It's so like what we think is enough in certain deals, and just like that trade proposal for 2 firsts with Ingram, what we think and what GMs think almost never aligns, and it's so hard to get inside their brains. Rusty says we don't have a single first-round pick to trade to Brooklyn. The next first-round pick the Cavs can trade, I'm 99.5% sure on this, is 2031. I'm 99% sure on that, 2031. Let's see what else we got. Trade Darius Garland and George Niang and Isaac Okoro for Jimmy Butler and Kevin Love. Yeah, if you could. If Miami would do that, sure, but I just don't know why Miami does. It takes two to tango in all these deals, and I think that's the hard part of making fake trades is, does it work for both teams? And in that one, I don't think they would ever go for that. So let's see. This is from Mitch Fillet. What do you think of adding a guy like Sadiq Bey as a 3-and-D wing if a trade doesn't work out? Another guy who I think would be a good signing. I don't think he moves the needle in any particular way, but certainly not a bad fit. A guy I'd be interested in, absolutely. But once again, just like Caleb Martin or Paul Reed, he's a good fit with more size than the Cavs' current 3-and-D wings. But I just don't think, if that's your offseason move to brag about, it's a pretty disappointing big offseason move. Let's see. Floyd, why do people call me McNuggets? On our third show, Joe Thomas called me McNuggets, and it just stuck. There's really no reason besides that. If Joe Thomas calls you something, it is what it is. Roland, I read one of your comments. I met it up there. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We had over 400 in here today. That was pretty sweet. Austin says, how do you feel about Amani Bates and his current development? The Cavs put out their summer league roster, I think it was yesterday, and it said Amani Bates was listed at 190 pounds. He then replied to a tweet that said he's up to 196, which means he's put on, if my math is correct, like 17 pounds of muscle. If you're going to believe the 196 from Amani Bates, I have no reason not to believe him. About 20 pounds of muscle. I'll be curious to see how that impacts his first step quickness in the summer league. But Amani Bates is the type of player who, going into his second professional season, should dominate the summer league. I don't mean like, oh, he played well. I'm talking dominate. He is a guy who is set up to thrive in those situations where it's a lot of iso ball, a lot of creation, one-on-one. There's very limited plays they run. They roll the ball out, go hoop. That is a situation for Imani to thrive. And if he's put on 20 pounds, essentially, and hasn't lost his first step quickness, and he hasn't changed the jump shot form with the added muscle, this is a guy who should be in contention to win Summer League MVP. I'm serious. Now, does that translate to traditional basketball in the regular season? We'll find out. But Amani Bates is in an absolute perfect position to thrive in the Summer League. Let's see. And then Pitt says, could he evolve into the shooting guard that Tracy McGrady was? Hey, Tracy McGrady is a Hall of Famer and a legit top 70 NBA player of all time. So if he can, hell yeah. I mean, that'd be the best case scenario. He has the tools. It's can he kind of put it all together? And that's the question that he had coming out of the draft. That was the question he had coming out of high school. The skill set is there. It's the willingness to play basketball the way a coach wants you to play. That has always kind of been Amani's biggest knock. And in the G League last year, you didn't hear that often. So hopefully he's taking the necessary steps to progress to being like that. Let's see. Rusty says, yes, 2031 is the next pick they can trade. Adam says the Cavs and Pelicans are playing chicken to see who budges first. That legitimately could be the case, by the way. That legitimately could be the case. Bow down before you serve. Trigger said if you could only have one, Cam Johnson or Hunter. I think Johnson's a better player and he's more healthy more frequently, so I would go Johnson, but I think they're relatively comparable. There was that rumor this weekend about Miles Bridges and the Cavs' interest in him. He ended up signing back with the Hornets. I'll just say this. From a basketball standpoint, Miles Bridges made a lot of sense. From an off-the-court standpoint, Miles Bridges, from all reports, and he was arrested and charged, not a great dude. And I'll just say I'm fine with the Cavs not pulling the trigger on Miles Bridges. So that's going to wrap it up. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I missed you guys. We're back on the show Monday. We will discuss this in more in-depth, throughout the week. Hopefully the Cavs have a move for us to discuss in depth tomorrow. But at this point, we are still sitting on the fact that Donovan Mitchell re-signed. The Cavs are putting together a coaching staff. And other than that, we have nothing to talk about. Appreciate you guys. I missed y'all. I love y'all. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace.